Hey everyone, welcome back here to my channel where I play Plan Zoo. My name is Nissa and today we get to finish Future Life Africa. I didn't get to do all I want, but we get the new DLC Tuesday, so I needed to get this done because again, mods may break, so I may not be able to enter the zoo again after Tuesday. But here we are, and this will be the final habitat, and I'm just gonna zoom out because it's not even everything the sun touches, it's even more than that. You can see it goes all the way here, all the way around, and it actually ends all the way over here. And this because this will be a very special habitat. So if you want to see how I build all of this, or just hear a little bit of how, and also we also needed to finish up this part, so if you also want to see that, then please keep watching. Okay guys, and today we are of course building a soft release enclosure, and I will talk about a little bit later what's a soft and a hard release when it comes to animals. Don't you worry, we will go over that. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're doing here more specifically. Because the new DLC come out Tuesday, so I'm a little busybody getting this zoo ready. I would have loved to finish both my zoos beforehand, but I simply can't find the time to do so. So we get to finish up Future Life Africa, and then I hope after the new DLC, hopefully it won't break my mods. Hopefully we can still get into Small Zoo and continue it there. But if we can't, it's just what it is, sadly. But at least I will have time to finish up this one, and I will also make a final zoo tour, which hopefully will be up tomorrow. However, I am a little pressed on time, so I'm not sure it's gonna happen. But that's what I'm working on currently. This building back here won't actually be super functional. It will just be the idea that you have a secondary quarantine out here. So we have the first quarantine that is animals going into Future Life project, but this quarantine will be for outgoing animals. Again, the entire idea by Future Life project is to get animals in, get them ready, or get them to breed so the babies will be ready to be released into the wild. And that's what we're building here today, is this idea of how we can release them into the wild, because some animals have a nature that is real strong and you can basically just release them. Other have been changed over time and partially domesticated. Even though in zoos we don't keep them as domesticated animals, some of their natural reflexes and needs and wants may be changed a little bit over time in a zoo and generations in a zoo, and therefore we need to make sure they can actually take care of themselves. Some animals will prefer much more for a hard release, which would be basically that something you do mostly with individual releases, which would be either an animal that live alone, for instance a tiger, a bear, a whatever, as single animals pretty much. Where you will go out and just release them into the wild, of course after a period of quarantine, and then hope they will figure out things on their own. You can of course have a tracker, so you can still keep an eye on it, and it can still be in a reserve or some kind of a protected area, but they will pretty much just be kicked out there. You can also do it with grouped animals to a certain regard, and then if you only have the one, push it out there, and then hopefully it will fast find a family group or a tribe or whatever it needs, and hope that that group or tribe will help them figure out things along the way. However, soft releases are something that can be much more beneficial for animals like pretty much everyone I have in here. We especially talk about bovines, big flock animals. We could also technically talk about lions, but it would be done a little differently. Again, if I put the lions in here, they would probably start eating the other animals, and then I can't release those animals, so that would be a little bit different. And to be honest, the habitat here, it's 40,000 square kilometers. Square meters. And it's probably not big enough. I didn't check what the standard was for this because I just needed it to be in a way that I could build it. So yeah, I also gonna focus most of my time on singular areas of this habitat and leave the rest of them open. But the idea is, before we're gonna release these animals into the wild, they are basically ready to be released in a manner that they are fine, they are healthy, they have the genetics we want to put out there, especially for the adults. We have a group here, healthy, we want to put them out there and breed with the very, very small group that's been released out there earlier, because they were already extinct in the wild. So we have these things that we want to do, but we kind of want them to learn to take care of themselves first. Therefore, you will partially release them, or a soft release, which you will release them in a closed off area where you can keep an eye on it, feed them if needed, but the idea is that they will start to learn to go and look for their food themselves. They will kind of have to learn to seek out water. They will not have a water bowl right where they are. They will have to go walk and look for it and seek things out, whatever they need. Again, these different animals have different needs, but all of these things are things they have to learn to do. I will just mention, this is not only something you do in Africa. For instance, we did talk about it in Future Life Canada with the wood bison, I believe it was, where it actually were flown in from the US and then had this very large enclosure area where they were released into first. Just get them ready for the environment and see how they behave. Is it too cold? Because even though you are from North America to Canada, but it's still colder the further north you get. It can also be the humidity that changed. There can be a lot of different things. There can also be different kind of viruses or sicknesses in the areas that you just need to make sure that the animal can handle before you set it out. It can also be an excuse to have this midway station where you can actually combine groups. For instance, if you want males from one genetic bank and females from another genetic bank, then you can also do it in a soft release enclosure. Before you, again, the entire idea with this soft release enclosure will be to set them out later. As you can see here, for Savannah, I put quite a bit of trees, and there's two reasons for it. One, I really want the trees that I already placed just as background for other habitats to stay there, because you wouldn't remove them by building this habitat. You would kind of try to go with what's there already. But I also want more trees than there usually are, because all of these animals will learn to seek out shadow from the sun. Again, we are in Africa, more specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, and it gets hot, especially in the middle of the day, and the sun is out and all of this. So the animals will also have to learn to seek out the shadows under the tree instead of going inside a house. So therefore, there need to be more than plenty of trees available, because it won't necessarily be something they automatically figure out, but they will kind of learn it by accidentally doing it because the trees are so plentiful. When we talked about the chimpanzees, we also mentioned the black and white rough lemur. where in those cases you, instead of making a soft release like you do here, of course you would have a partially soft release where you had grouped all of these animals together first. With the chimpanzees, they were already in the same care, but for the black and white rough lemurs, these were domesticated pet animals that were trying to figure out how to make it on their own, building a troop, which some of them never had before and such. So you would do that in a soft release enclosure also. But what you did specifically with them were also, when you released them in island areas where there wasn't already competing animals. That is also a way to protect them. This is not a stable way of doing so, because you kind of need to release them where they are needed, or where they are extinct, or where you want them to combine their genetics and blood with other chimpanzees or lemurs. So you are kind of bound off on that. But the idea of releasing them in an area where they don't have to compete with others can help them to at least establish, how do we do this? What do we do with this happens? The idea of how something as simple as how far up in the trees does it make sense to climb, because we need to climb high enough to be safe and find food. But the further up we climb, the harder or the more it hurts if we fall down. And that's happened especially with babies, where they simply fall down. They can handle a lot, but there's no reason to make it more dangerous than it have to be. I will also mention that the idea of a soft release is something that aren't a stable, in a sense like this is how we do this and will always do this. It is something that is constantly evaluated and worked on and thought about, and it will also change from animal to animal, and it also changes simply on what the goal is. For instance, if you are gonna release a animal into a reserve, for instance, where they already is partially protected, well, then you go for what we need to do with these animals. If you go for elephant, then moves a lot, then it's very, very important that they are ready to go out there and look for food and look for water and look for all of these things every single day, because they are needing to move that much or they will simply die out. And I think myself, but also a lot of other people, had this idea initially that as long as you put animals out in the wild, then they will simply live there and be there. But the fact is that you will need to take care of these animals and make sure that they have all of these abilities to take care of themselves. I would just mention that going over here and looking at the little food corner thing I'm making here, it's a very fast build, and it was kind of the idea that it should have been more individual build, but I really needed to figure out how to make it all done before the new DLC. We also actually lose 2 small habitats in the zoo, nothing that I had in mind specifically of what I wanted, but the as you can see in the background here at the water transformer in the background, I wanted something small back there, and we don't have time for that, so that's gonna be a flower bed. And between this enclosure we built today and the path next to the chimpanzees, I would also like to have built something small there, but that's just gonna be a lot of elephant grass instead. So it's not gonna look weird that we are lacking these 2. I will also just mention that the entrance area is not optimal at all, but I will talk about that a little more in my final zoo tour tomorrow. Anyway, when we talk about studies about animals, we have to keep learning and learning from other things, as I also went into in my video with the chimpanzees, where we talked about they have used studies from orangutan, and then later used the studies from the chimpanzees to help out with the black and white rough lemurs. When we look at this entire idea of soft releases, we're actually looking. I'm looking at a article on conservation and evidence. It is. I'm not sure it actually is owned by or part of, but it is some of the documentation that IUCN linked to a lot. So I will, of course, also link this below. And the studies they use and refers to a lot. But I'm looking at the action and the action plan, or the action of soft release. The article is called Translocate to Re-establish or Boost Populations in Native Range. And some of the things here will also be more looking towards, such as animals that just is in the wrong place in nature, for instance. I'm thinking of elephant, especially Indian elephants, where we have heard multiple times where they, because they move so much around, then they went in one direction, and when they want to go the other direction, someone built a city or road or something, and the elephant are completely demolishing everything around them. So therefore they have to be moved out of the way, both for human safety but also for the animal safety. In Greenland, we hear about the polar bears that have this kind of an issue where some years the ice melt very much and they have to swim really, really far to find food. And in the winter, sometimes it's really, really cold and the ice freeze so much as it can be really, really long trip to get out to the water and find food. And both of these things can end up with polar bears thinking, well, what then? How then can I find food? And the obvious question is, will humans throw a lot of food away? And honestly, we can't really fault them for thinking that, because we do. So some of these polar bears move into the cities, and if you don't know, Greenland do not have a lot of big cities, so we aren't like talking about Berlin, New York, Copenhagen, or anything like that. We talk very, very small towns, sometimes 15 houses or so. But when a polar bear move in and find all of this free food they don't have to work for, they aren't always inclined to move out again. So there it really helped that they come in sometimes with these giant helicopters and basically tranquilize the polar bear and fly them far enough away, so at least if they find their way back, it will take quite some time. I know future Life Sub-Saharan Africa is specifically made to be talking about Sub-Saharan Africa, but this is just one example on how something you learn in one part of the world can be really, really beneficial for other parts in the world. And in the key message here, they mentioned that 64 study evaluated the effect of translocating mammals to re-establish or boost population in their native range. Native range is an important keyword here. It's not about thinking, oh, I would like to have crocodiles in my backyard, so we're gonna put some out there. It is to either boost the population where they already are or re-establish it where it have gone extinct. Again, you need to look at many factors doing this, especially if you want to re-release animals where they went extinct. You have to figure out why they went extinct first, so you don't release animals just to the same fate. But what I find very, very interesting here is the next part, where they say of these 64 studies, 20 studies were in the US, 8 in Italy, 4 in Canada and South Africa. 3 in the Netherlands and Spain, 2 in each of the USA and Canada, Zimbabwe, Sweden, Australia, and the USA and Mexico, and 1 in each of Uganda, the UK, Brazil, France, Portugal, Africa, Europe, North America, Botswana, Nepal, Chile, Slovakia, Ukraine, Slovakia, and Poland, and the global study. I know some of the countries get mixed in this way, but it's because some of these studies are bi-countryal. So it have been like a study across borders, which I just love when countries can work out to a way to work together to save the world. It's just magical to see, and we honestly do not see enough of that, especially in later years. But all of these studies are, of course, not on the exact same thing, but it's all studies that refers to things we can use in this soft release idea. For instance, 22 of the studies were about abundance, specifically the numbers of the individuals. Did the numbers of the individuals in the region go up over time, or did they just continue to go down? Did they go down slower, faster, whatever happened? Did we actually hurt other populations in the area? And so on. We also have 16 studies of reproductive success, and here it is very important to note that reproductiveness is not a success before the next generation is born. I can release a lot of animals in an area and they can get a lot of babies, but if none of those babies actually survive long enough to get babies on their own, then the population haven't overall gotten a boost at all. This is also why when we talk about individuals in the wild, most of the time we say mature individuals, because mature individuals are individuals that are breedable. Babies, you cannot count on them because you can get a lot of babies a year and you can lose a lot of babies a year, but you cannot count babies as a sustained number. 39 of the studies were specifically about the survival, some of them of the survival of animals born in nature and live in nature, and some of them about the study of the survival of animals released to the wild. There is always a chance when you release animals that have been born in captivity that they won't have their natural reflexes, such something as easy as that's a lion, maybe I should run the other way. That's a man with a gun, well, humans usually feed me, so we like him. Things like that can affect the survival rate of animal you put out in the wild, and this is especially a factor where the self-release really can help. That's also why, if you notice, you can drive into the self-release or enclosure, but you will not be able to walk in there. You cannot touch the animals. The keepers in there would probably also have special rules for what they can do and not do with the animals. 3 of the studies were specifically in conditions that may change or not change based off the released animals. And then we have 9 studies on the behavior of the animals, which is kind of split up to 2 undergroups, which is the behavior use, which is 7 studies, and behavior change, which is 2 studies. Again, we always need to be aware when we release animals to the wild. Do they change their captivity behavior, or do they use the behavior from captivity? Again, a lot of these studies go into each other and cover kind of the same things, but it always helps if you can find a million studies saying the same thing, then you kind of know you can count on it, compared to a study that is singular and haven't ever been repeated. Once again, the only thing I have mentioned here is just the baseline for this article. all of the good stuff I don't have time to go into, because I don't feel right going into the good stuff without actually putting the baseline out there. I would like to actually talk more about this kind of studies, but I'm not sure if you actually want to hear it or if it's just boring for you to hear. So please tell me in the comment section below how you feel about these kind of things talking about compared to when I talk about specific animals. Yeah, I talked way too much. I'm sorry about that again. I linked this article below so you can go and read for it yourself. But besides that, I hope that my video on the final tour will go out tomorrow. Enjoy the cinematics, and I will come back afterwards. Okay guys, that's all I got for you today. I just couldn't figure out how to showcase all in one picture here at last, so this is what you get. I really hope you enjoyed it. As I already mentioned, I will try to get the final suit tour up tomorrow, Sunday, but no promises. And for now guys, you know the drill. Like, subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you know the next time I upload a video. I really hope to see you again, either in the comments below or in the next video. Bye guys!